That's right. It is that time of the week again. It is currently 6:02 on this Sunday, the 13th of March. You're listening to the 6-8 with DJ Eclectic. I'm your host, Christopher Haig. Thank you for tuning in again this week and listening, and a special hello to any of my new listeners this week. Welcome to the show. So, I don't know about you guys, but this week was a very, very big blur. You know, it was like I had the show last week, I got back to my room, I did some prep for this week, and then it's almost like I went to bed that night and woke up and it was today. It was like the whole week was a blur. I didn't really do much outside of classes. Class wasn't all that exciting, to be honest. And, yeah, it's kind of disorienting. And then, of course, daily savings time. You know, the clock jumped forward an hour this morning. So it was already annoying enough waking up, you know, at what I thought was 11:30. It's like, oh no, it's past noon and my day is half gone. So yeah, kind of a disorienting week, but a very, very warm one. And the few times it did rain, it seemed to rain overnight. You know, there was a lot of, you know, like 11 to 5 a.m. rain, and then it would stop, and then it wouldn't start again during the day, which was nice. You know, on campus, most of, if not all of the snow is melted. By now there are a few piles of, it's not really snow, it's like dirt, but you can tell it used to be snow. And then, you know, it rains, so everything gets damp, but there's very little trace of any snow, which is good, and it looks like this week is going to be continuing that trend. Alright, we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we'll get to some news and our first check of this week's weather. Why was a 16-year-old high school student arrested recently? And what happened with the Wayne State pregnancy scandal? All of that and more when we come back to the 6-8 with DJ Eclectic. But right now, it's time to party up with some DMX. There you go. That was some old school Avril Lavigne with Complicated. Before that was Bring Me to Life, an Evanescence classic. It is currently 6:17 on this Sunday, the 13th of March. You're listening to the 6-8 with DJ Eclectic. I'm your host, Christopher Haig. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Okay, so we're going to jump right into the news, and this one, if you guys were listening last week, you'll remember I told you the story of the high school teacher, Leanne Arthur, out of South Carolina. She was forced to resign after a student broke into her desk, found her phone, took a photo on his phone of nude photos on her phone, and distributed them to other students at the school, printed out some copies of the picture, and, you know, put them on social media. It was a huge mess. And she was forced to resign while the student had nothing done to him. There were no consequences for the student's actions. And for those of you who happened to catch last week's show, and those of you who know me and how my brain works, that's absolute crap. I was not at all happy about it. You know, the pictures were taken on Valentine's Day. They were meant for Arthur's husband. You know, and the big thing she was forced to resign over was the school superintendent, David Eubanks, said she was contributing to the delinquency of a minor by having her phone unlocked with the nudes on them. And I also mentioned, brought up the idea of revenge porn and how there was no way this kid was going to get away with it. There was going to be something done. And there was. On Friday, he was arrested and charged with Computer Crimes Act and aggravated voyeurism. Those two charges are frequently pieced together in lieu of, the existing revenge porn laws. He got arrested. Now, Leanne doesn't currently have her job back. There was an online petition started by students pretty quickly after she was forced to resign, and it almost immediately surpassed its goal of 1,000 signatures. Yesterday, the petition had been signed more than 12,000 times. It had been at 12,526 as of yesterday. The petition was updated on Friday with a passage bashing the school superintendent, I'll say his name again, David Eubanks, Eubanks, that'll be very important later, who called the petition insignificant. And this was, like, he called it insignificant when it had 4,000 or 5,000 signatures. You know, when it had quadrupled and quintupled its original goal. So she currently doesn't have her job back, but the student had been arrested, and forensic investigation, when Police Chief Sam White looked into the matter, the photos on Arthur's phone were locked in a separate passcode-protected folder that the student had to hack into. So he is looking at a lot more charges. I can only imagine. He's looking at, just a lot more crap being flung at him. Eubanks, who really is just the definition of a blind eye superintendent. Like, he knows what happened. He knows how it happened. He knows the truth. And he has more than 12,000 signatures saying, hire this woman back. She didn't do anything wrong. Now remember, she's a 13-year veteran at the high school. She's been teaching there for nearly a decade and a half and was just let go with, for no reason, and hasn't even been approached for rehire. So there's crap coming the kids' way. There's more than enough coming at Eubanks' way, which, now, I'm not going to condone any action taken at Eubanks by you, my listeners. I'm not going to condone it, but I'm also not going to be upset if you do it. I mean, he absolutely deserves everything he's about to get. There's a difference between, okay, nude photos were leaked. Obviously, you react to the person who had the news because that's the society that we live in. But for him to not do anything to the kid, first off, not hire back Arthur immediately, and then to not do it when he has 12,500 signatures saying we want this person back, and then to call it insignificant at 5,000? Crazy. Beyond crazy. Out of his mind. Currently, the student whose name hasn't been released, probably for his safety, is being detained in Columbia, South Carolina at the Department of Juvenile Justice. And Arthur told WSPA she plans on officially pressing charges this coming week. So I'll be sure to update you next show, which I don't do all too often. I very, very rarely update stories. Is normally, because I only have a show one day a week, normally updates lose some of their timeliness. But yeah, I'll be sure to, this story in particular, I'll keep you guys updated. And now moving from South Carolina right here to Michigan, right here to Wayne State, we have a pregnancy lawsuit. Always fun to deal with, always fun to cover. So this one is kind of a weird one, and another, like, how are people this idiotic? This is another one of those stories that, despite a decent enough outcome, you really lose faith in the people who have power. So, a former Wayne State University student won $850,000 after being told to wear looser-fitting clothing and not to rub her pregnant belly because it might excite men. I wish I could be making that up, but I'm not. This is coming, right out of Click on Detroit. So, Tina Varlesi won this has been going on for 8 years. She won an 8-year lawsuit against the university that began in 2007 when she was studying social work. She interned with the Salvation Army during her last semester, and she was pregnant at the time. And the whole crap snowball started rolling with some inappropriate questions like, why don't I see a ring? What's going on? And statements like, the men can look but they can't touch, as if she needed to be told that first off. And do not show your pregnancy. Which, okay. At the time she was interning, this was her last semester at Wayne State, she was already, decently far along in her pregnancy. So it was like, for those of you out there who have, been able to see your mother be pregnant or see your wife pregnant, up to a certain point, there is no hiding it. There's absolutely no hiding it. And this was coming from people working at the Salvation Army, her internship leaders. She was told many times, verbally and also in writing, do not touch or rub your belly. You're going to sexually stimulate men that are here being treated for addiction problems. Which, I'm not going to judge you for your perversions, but if you get turned on by a woman caring for her pregnancy, definitely not in the norm. She wore... now, Varlesi did wear, maternity clothes, as most people do, but was told even more implicitly to wear muumuu-style dresses. She complained multiple times to university staff that she felt discriminated against, and nothing happened. Later on, just when she thought everything was at the peak of bad, she was asked why she didn't just drop out when she became pregnant. And her internship leader turned around and gave her a failing grade for the internship. And then she had been thrown out of school a week before graduation. Now, what did Wayne State say? They're very disappointed with the court's ruling. Wayne State officials on Tuesday said that they're disappointed with the court siding with the pregnant woman that they in the Salvation Army had discriminated against for being pregnant, thrown her out of school, took her internship away. They're disappointed that the court sided with her and gave her $850,000. After they and Salvation Army could have ruined her life with a kid on the way. Like, she'd been thrown out of school, meaning no college degree, meaning no classes that require a degree. She'd been thrown out of her internship, meaning she no longer had that experience to fall back on for any work. And they're disappointed with the court siding with her? Like I said, this is one of those stories that really makes you question your faith in the people who have power. These are like the top of Wayne State administration that are saying that they don't like the court siding with the pregnant woman who they had very, very blatantly discriminated against. Now, Varlesi, did give birth. She has a beautiful, healthy 7-year-old son. And she said she was proud she spoke up. She said, quote, "It's really in poor taste and a disservice to the students," end quote. That's absolutely right. Now, here's the thing. And I'm about to get into some controversial discussion here, but it's what I do. There are a few things here. One, naturally there are going to be questions when a student becomes pregnant. I can't really speak from experience, since in 2 years here I've only actually seen one pregnant person, and that was in passing as I was going the other way. But I can only imagine, as people just out in public get asked, when they're due. I know that for a fact. And I can only imagine in school it's going to be worse because of the stigma of being active in school, sexually active. I know that that's going to happen, but for people at a Salvation Army to do that and go, "Oh, I don't see a ring, what's going on?" I don't understand why it escalated to the level that it did. And then to tell her, wear loose-fitting clothes, dictating what she is to wear and how she's to act because it might excite men, does a disservice to her and does a disservice to the guys. Does a disservice to her because, much like school dress code policies, which are rampantly out of control, and I'll get to that in a bit, it's dictating what she is to wear. They're controlling her wardrobe, which is not okay. It's not okay, especially beyond high school. This is 2007 college, and she's being told what to and what not to wear. So that's a disservice to her, and it's a disservice to the guys, because she was told not to rub her pregnant belly and to wear looser fitting clothing because it might excite men, which paints all men as dogs, which I know for a fact is absolutely not true. There are guys like that, but to dictate what she is to do and not do and what she has to wear because we're all horn-dogged and can't keep it in our pants is extremely detrimental to us in every way, shape, and form. And then they're treating Tina like that's all she can possibly do. Pregnancy isn't about, you're bringing a child into this world, you're experiencing the miracle of childbirth and the wonders of motherhood. No. It's like, you're pregnant, you're going to get men, you're going to, turn men on because you're pregnant. And that's not okay. So, back to the dress code thing. There is a serious problem with the mindset of society that they have the power to control what women wear at any level for the same reason. High school dress codes. This hunk of garbage. All for the same reason. You're going to distract the men. They're not going to be able to focus. You're going to turn them on with what you're wearing. When anybody adds fuel to that fire, you're saying, no, you don't get to control yourself. We do, for these reasons that are completely out of your control and shouldn't be placed on your shoulders to begin with. Now, I am not a feminist. I don't classify myself as a feminist. If not for not sharing quite the same mindset, less for that and more for the stigma that comes with the word, because I know what 21st century social media feminists look like. And I'm not dealing with the stigma of that phrase, that label. I'm not a feminist. But I do agree that cases like this, an out-of-control high school dress code, high school, going to, especially, high school and college both are supposed to prepare you for the real world. Where, yes, there is a dress code, but that's more about professionalism. And, of course, it's tailored to all of your, it's tailored to each individual industry once you get into it. If you're a woman CEO, you're not going to come in with a crop top and loose-fitting jeans. You're going to come in with a business suit, because that's the line of work you work in. If you work at a radio station, you don't have to wear a business suit. You don't even really have to wear a shirt and tie. Just try not to have any graphic words written on your t-shirts and you'll be fine. But for high schools to go so out of control, and then for Wayne State to follow suit with this ridiculous dress code mentality, it's out of control and it needs to stop. Everybody adds fuel to this fire. nobody says no to it. I've seen plenty of stories where, and where it's not even subtle the way they deal with it. If they see that a girl is, and it's only ever girls too, that's important. If they see that their dress code is being violated, even if it's really not, and they're just seriously reaching, they'll pull the student out of class, interrupting their education, bring them to the principal's office, wasting school administration time, eventually end up calling the parents, interrupting their paying jobs, which pays for the education that just got interrupted, send them home to change, expect them to change, and then come back. Why is it not more subtle than that? And it's always in the middle of classes, too. That's what I've noticed with all these cases. It's right in the middle of the most inopportune time to do anything. You catch them during any school, if there are schools that work like my high school did, and they have free periods, which I imagine most high schools do. Catch them during their free period because they don't have any class. They're not required to be anywhere. If you have to tag them for dress code, get them then. Get them during homeroom. Because that's a lot like, you're required to be in a room, but nothing happens during homeroom. It's like simple school announcements that you can either not care about, like I did most days, or catch them on the website, which, I didn't do as often, but that's because I mostly didn't care about the announcements. Get them when they're not doing something that pertains directly to their education. Or better yet, don't do it at all. The past few incidents I've seen have been ridiculous. There was one, the most recent one I've seen. I don't remember where it was. I think it was South Carolina, but I'm not quite sure. Don't quote me. The girl was accused of having a skirt that was too short. There are a lot of strict rules on skirts. But that's mostly when it's just bare legs under it. This girl had pants on under the skirt and still got tagged for having it too short. Had to get on her knees in the principal's office for it to get measured by the principal with no one else in the room, and then turned around and sent home. It's an out of control situation, and I don't know why it keeps happening with nothing, with no safeguards, no common sense behind it. It's a difference between the letter of the law and the meaning of the law. What you actually see and what it actually means. There's no common sense to dictate the difference between the two. That much is obvious. And normally it's high school, which tends to be, depending on what high school you go to, it can be a bit preppy. And so while it's not okay, it is a bit more understandable. But for a university, a full university like Wayne State, to act like a high school, worse than a high school, because they kicked Tina out a week and a half before she graduated. And then didn't get in contact with the Salvation Army, who had failed her in her internship because of her pregnancy. There was no other reason. Every so often, the Salvation Army internships will have, checkups. It's a routine evaluation. It's a job evaluation. But for interns, Tina had passed every single one of them. And then she didn't. She did nothing differently between her last two evaluations. She got failed in her internship evaluation and then let go by the Salvation Army because of her pregnancy. Because she got pregnant, and then she got let go by the university for the same reason. equally, and it's an equal lack of common sense. I might tend to understand it with the Salvation Army, because they do have more of a religious tinge to them. So, depending on how orthodox or how hardcore they are, okay, I can kind of understand where they're coming from. If they're super hardcore orthodox Christians, if they have that tinge to them. Pregnancy out of wedlock is technically not permitted by the letter of the law. So while it's not okay, there is a religious aspect to it that, does have to be upheld. But for a public university that doesn't have that tinge to it, that religious tinge, for them to follow suit and boot this pregnant woman out of school before she can graduate, after she had already been let go, they were basically giving her the middle finger, saying she's SOL, go graduate from somewhere else. And rightfully so, she won her, $850,000. And then Wayne State says, no, we don't agree with that. They're disappointed with the courts for giving her $850,000. In a discrimination case that really, with everything compounded, really could have, seriously screwed up her life and her kid's life. It could have ruined her life. No college degree. No internship to fall back on. All for what? Being pregnant? Deciding to go through the miracle of childbirth? Deciding to bring a child into this life and be a mother? Which is said to be, one of the most euphoric sensations in the world. Being a mother. Deciding it was time for her to have an offspring and bring it into the world and make the world a better place with this child. She lost her job and lost her university. They didn't see that. Serious lapse in common sense, and more than common sense, just being a decent human being. It's scary to think that everything happened with people who have the power to do it, which makes it even worse than just street discrimination. Alright. To put everybody in a better mood, let's look at how awesome the forecast is looking for next week. We have another week of 60s and 50s, which is awesome. Not going to be a whole lot of rain. The heaviest rain is actually going to be tomorrow. High of 62, low of 48, 50% chance of rain. Tuesday is going to be a high of 62, low of 46, mostly cloudy. So we're going to get a bit of that sun. Wednesday, exact same temps, 62, low of 48, partly cloudy and windy. So that'll be Wednesday and Thursday are probably going to be your best days to, get outside and enjoy the fact that it's the middle of March and we don't have snow anymore. Friday is going to be a high of 48, low of 37, partly cloudy. Saturday and Sunday are both high of 48, and we have a 30% chance of rain both of those days. So the week is going to be perfect, and it's fine that this is happening on the weekend, because you can, be inside, and you don't have to really go anywhere. Just chill out in your house. All right, we're going to take another break here. When we come back, we're going to take a look at why Trump is making himself look like a bigger jackass than normal, and why Native Americans are suddenly mad at J.K. Rowling. You're listening to The 6-8 with DJ Eclectic. Here is Thanks for the Memories by Fall Out Boy. There you go. That was Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. Before that, was Heart versus Mind by I Prevail. It is currently 6:57 here on this Sunday, the 13th of March. You're listening to the 6-8 with DJ Eclectic here on WQBR Eagle Radio. I'm your host, Chris. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Okay, so I'm sure, as most of you know by now, Trump, everybody's favorite Oompa Loompa presidential candidate, was supposed to have an event in Chicago at the University of Illinois. Everything was good until protesters started to clash with Trump supporters, and the rally was postponed. He did not show up to Chicago. This was supposed to be on Friday. Both inside and outside the University of Illinois in Chicago, demonstrators and Trump supporters turned violent as tensions are very high surrounding this man. There were heightened concerns of violence in general at the GOP frontrunners' rallies. Hundreds of demonstrators packed into an arena, and before Trump had even shown up, they broke into protest. At least 5 sections in the arena were absolutely filled with protesters. And after having a meeting with law enforcement, decided that for the safety of all the tens of thousands of people who had gathered in and around the University of Illinois, the rally would be postponed to another date. There were a few fistfights between supporters and protesters. Chicago police moved in to restore order, and he didn't show up. And Donald Trump, being the ever decent man that he is, decided to blame Bernie Sanders for the protests. Because I guess he has to have a target of the week, and I'm assuming Hillary was busy doing something else somewhere else. So he accused Bernie Sanders of having all of his supporters there at the University of Illinois to protest his event because Sanders was scared of Trump. And then turned around and, like any decent person, likened Bernie Sanders to a communist. Yeah. Again, wish I could be making it up. No, Trump did actually liken Sanders to a communist. In Dayton, Ohio, Trump said, and I quote, "Some represented Bernie, our communist friend," end quote. Later in the day, Trump turned around and said protesters at his Cleveland event are, quote, Bernie's crowd. You know, Bernie was saying Mr. Trump should speak to his crowd. You know where they come from? Bernie's crowd. They're Bernie's crowd. And he told Sanders to get his people in line. So, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about how he's, claiming all of those protesters were all Sanders people. Not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the communist friend comment. And how playground people, kids just learning about history style that comment is. Way out of left field and way beneath any sort of presidential candidate to liken socialism to communism. They're two very different things. They have been since the emergence of communism. And this man that some of us are pushing into the presidency, I'm sure he's going to turn around and say, oh, in the heat of the moment, I mixed up words. But as of right now, he called Bernie a democratic socialist, a communist. And that is not okay. Bernie came out and said he pushed back against Trump, calling on him to denounce violence at his rallies and labeling him a pathological liar, both of which are 100% true, as we've seen time and again. Protesters, there have been a few cases where protesters at Trump rallies have been sucker punched by attendees there, and nothing happens to the people who incite violence. Of course, why would anything happen? I don't know what Donald Trump is doing on a day-to-day basis that he can go around and pull stunts like this. It's one thing to be an idiot. It's another thing that as a businessman, a guy who has had some success despite the failure of Trump Water and Trump Steaks and Trump University, all of which I still can't believe he tried, there's a different, for him to liken socialism to communism and say with the authority that he has that he shouldn't really have in the first place. It's one thing to be an idiot, it's another thing to do that. Especially from somebody who has, I assume he's had some amount of decent education, but to confuse socialism for communism? Come on, Trump. Really? Are you that dumb? Or are you just in the heat of the moment? Because he was tired of people protesting him and getting in his face and calling him a liar. I assume he's going to go with the latter of the two. And in the wake of this, the New York Times and Rolling Stones both published lists of Donald Trump's insults. And people called the Obama-Mitt Romney race a race of personal insults. The New York Times published a list called the 202 People, Places, and Things Donald Trump Has Insulted on Twitter. Over the course of his candidacy for president, Trump has used Twitter to insult presidential candidates, journalists, news organizations, nations, a Neil Young song, and even a lectern in the Oval Office. Jeb Bush, Ben Cardin, Karl Rove, Graydon Carter, Amy Chozick. Like for Jeb Bush, here's one. Just got contact lenses and got rid of the glasses. He wants to look cool, but is far too late. Hypocrite. Just another clueless politician. Has no clue. How can Jeb Bush beat Hillary Clinton if he can't beat anyone else on the GOP debate stage with $150 million? Called him a lightweight. Called him a lightweight again. Weak. No chance. Weak. Jeb failed as Jeb. He insulted the Huffington Post, saying they should change their fraudulent story. Money losing. Money losing again. Money losing a third time. They only write bad stories about me. So that was the New York Times list. The Rolling Stone published a list of, while the New York Times did the people, places, and things, Rolling Stone published the insults themselves that is used. And he really likes to repeat his material, despite saying that he doesn't repeat himself. Let's take a look. He's used the words failing, or some variation of it failing, 66 times. He's used lightweight 37 times, dishonest 36 times, dumb or dummy 33 times, bad, sad, dope, weak, liar, loser, the worst, boring, a clown, stupid, not nice. You forget, this is a businessman. More than a businessman, this is a presidential candidate who's relying on words like bad or sad. Stupid, not nice. a loser, the worst. Sounding less like a presidential candidate and more like that annoying kid in elementary school who decided to run his mouth every day at recess no matter how many people wanted him to shut up. Just didn't get it. I think protesters should stop bringing science and start bringing thesauruses for Trump to use. He can obviously use that more than money. Some of his favorites, though, the phrase, "you just don't have it." As used that to insult Obama, Frank Luntz, the Jets. He likes the phrase, "you're a dog." Chuck Todd will be fired. This is from Twitter, and I quote, "I hear that Sleepy Eyes at Chuck Todd will be fired like a dog from ratings-starved Meet the Press. I can't imagine what is taking so long." So, like I said, I don't know what he does on a daily basis to fill his head with the thought that it's okay for anybody in any position of power to do this, but it obviously can't be good. He doesn't have actual people. He has corporate yes men who've been with him since he tried Trump University and failed, and that said Trump water was a good idea, and that wasn't, and that said Trump steaks was a good idea, and that wasn't. But yeah, not sure, don't know why he's still in the race. I imagine it's because the sad society that we live in enjoys stirring the pot and people who are famous for being famous. That's why the Kardashians have 7 or 8 seasons of their crappy show. That's why celebrities end up in the news so often in general. So, from one story of crazy to another, for those fans of the Harry Potter series, I'm sure you all know that J.K. Rowling published a few short stories last week titled History of Magic in North America. This was after Pottermore released a map of all the different magical schools across the world, and to expand the world of the Harry Potter universe. And she posted some short stories about magic in America and how that ties into everything. And for those of you who really look in depth into the Harry Potter series and all of the references and allusions that she makes throughout the 7 books, she draws a lot of parallels between real life and Harry Potter. The first magical war was World War II. It took place at the exact time with the same people and had the same outcome. And that's just one of the most well-known examples of the timelines matching up to cement the universe in some sort of reality, to make it seem that much more interesting. But her new stories about history and the magic of North America, which chronicled wizarding culture from the 14th to the 17th century, it was the first story specifically, was criticized for lumping all Native Americans into one group, appropriating their stories and, quote, completely rewriting these traditions, in the end quote, in the words of Cherokee scholar blogger Adrian Keene. So, I read the stories. I've read them 3 or 4 times now. I like when any sort of Harry Potter material gets made. It's the series, the universe has been just such a big part of my life since 2nd grade. That's when I started reading the books, because I wanted to see the first movie. And I was told no movies until you read the books, so I started reading the books over a decade ago. And I looked at the references to, obviously, if you're talking about North America, if you're talking about North America in the 14th to 17th centuries, you're going to run into Native Americans. And in the way J.K. Rowling writes it, it's cemented in reality, so she's not going to write around Native Americans or erase them entirely. she uses them to cement the Harry Potter universe reality and to draw some parallels, like how I mentioned World War II, and that being the basis for the first Wizarding War in the Harry Potter universe. Now, Dr. Keene went on Twitter and said, quote, "It's not your world. It's our real native world. And Skinwalker stories have context, roots, and reality," end quote. Skinwalkers, J.K. Rowling wrote about Skinwalkers, people who could change into animal form, which is the American version of an animagus, which was the exact same thing, just that was in Europe. So you can already see it's the same basic concepts. It's just applied to a different area at a different time. Keene went on to say, quote, "You can't just claim and take a living tradition of a marginalized people. That's straight up colonialism/appropriation. These are not my traditions, so I'm asking for permission, figuring out how to respect while being able to critique." That's what she said that J.K. Rowling should have done. That she should have asked for permission to use the stories. Quote, "This is clearly not legwork at JK_Rowling did with this writing. Native communities use reciprocity, respect, and relationships as benchmarks." Navajo writer Brian Young added, "My ancestors didn't survive colonization, so you could use our culture as a convenient prop." And another tweeter who goes by Ojibwe writer Mari says, "It burns me that white author stories about natives will drown out actual native author stories." At JK_Rowling profits from this. So, here's the thing, right? If my experience with the 7 books in 2nd grade, so you figure I was 7, 8, 9 at the absolute oldest. It's probably a few years before that. Especially with anybody at that age, seeing anything in such a concrete universe like that makes you want to explore it and learn what actually happened. You know, like for the Harry Potter universe, now I go and look things up that don't appear in the books at all, that are only mentioned. I explore the greater universe because there was a blink and you'll miss it reference in the middle of one of the books. So if that has taught me anything, it's that seeing J.K. Rowling's depiction of skinwalkers in her stories and knowing how, you know, I don't want to say rabid, but how rabid the Harry Potter fan base is, and how quickly the Harry Potter Wikipedia will update. We're going to have plenty of articles about skinwalkers with Native American sources. And if my experience has taught me anything, there are going to be plenty of people who see J.K. Rowling's depiction of the skinwalkers and go, okay, well, where is that coming from? People are going to investigate. People are going to want to know. And so they're going to look up the actual Native American skinwalkers. You know? They're going to take what J.K. Rowling wrote and then look into what inspired it. My first semester here, I had a Harry Potter literature class where we looked into the reality of all of the different references that J.K. Rowling makes and all of the things she drew inspiration from. I had a class surrounding such a simple action. You know, we looked at all of the allusions to Greek mythology and other books and real events like World War II and the First Wizarding War, which I've now brought up 3 times, and these people are deciding to blow past that, make it a race thing, and get angry about it. You know, there was Dr. Adrian Keene wrote an article. Her issues weren't just Twitter-based. She did have a full blog post where she mentioned that, she doesn't like how everything was appropriated and how it was, kind of written off as, not actually having happened. One of the things that she mentioned in the blog post was how I guess it's a tradition to not share stories and legends outside of the tribe community. Like I said, I'm assuming that that's a tradition because Adrian did touch on it. Then she said that because it's, a tradition to not share stories outside of the tribe, that she doesn't want to be answering questions that people might have when it, pertaining to what J.K. Rowling wrote. Which is deflection in lieu of being mad. Which isn't how society works. That's not how any facet of society works. You don't get to just deflect and be angry about it. Because your deflecting proves, deflecting from people asking questions proves you wrong down to the very core. They're like, oh, this is just being written off as, fiction, and she's using it and manipulating it for her own uses and for her own profit. But people asking you questions, people going right to the source and wanting to learn more about this proves you wrong. It did spark legitimate interest. But they don't want to answer questions. They just want to deflect and be mad about it. Like I said, that's not how the world works. You're not allowed to just deflect to be mad about it. And while, okay, if it is a tradition to not spread Native stories outside the Native community, okay, I get that. That makes sense. And if it is a tradition, I assume it's part of, keeping your culture your own. And keeping the stories that have been passed down through generations and generations, keeping them in Native families. And, that's okay, you can do that. But you can't get mad at somebody who may or may not know about that tradition deciding to not even rewrite your traditions, but to use them as a landmark in a separate fictional universe's timeline that has roots in reality, has direct references to reality. She's not actually destroying anything. She didn't destroy the importance of World War II by building the first wizarding war around it. None of the families who were torn apart by World War II, who had to be relocated because their cities were bombed through the ground, none of them got mad because of the, looking back on a fairly blatant reference to World War II in this fictional universe. None of them got upset about it. Why didn't they get upset? Because there wasn't any appropriation or lessening of impact. There was no, oh, this didn't happen, it's now mine to twist. It's a landmark for the timeline of a fictional reality that has been happening since the 90s, when the books were first published. And it's no longer it was never an issue. But now it is, because some people decide to make it a race thing. Which, don't even know why I'm even remotely surprised by that. Alright, enough about that. Got my race rant out of my system for the week. Got a few sports updates for you. First, starting off with Eastern Michigan basketball. We were knocked out of the MAC tournament, losing to the top-seeded Akron 65-63 in an incredibly close game. Thompson led the Eagles with 15 points and 12 rebounds. Nazione also had 12 rebounds. Detroit Pistons, we beat down the 76ers 125-111, and definitely not a Pistons-esque performance. It was actually quite enjoyable to watch. Jackson led Detroit with 24 points. Andre Drummond had 15 rebounds. We moved up to 8th in the Eastern Conference. The next game is Wednesday at 8 p.m. against the Wizards at the Verizon Center in Washington. And the Red Wings beat the Rangers 3-2 in overtime. Brad Richards managed to turn what would have been a loss into a tie with his second goal in the last 2 minutes of the third period. Darren Helms scored the winning goal in overtime. The Red Wings are set to take on the Maple Leafs at the Joe tonight in about 10 minutes. The next game after that is Tuesday against the Flyers in Philadelphia. So, got a few exciting games to watch. Unfortunately, Eastern Michigan did get knocked out of the MAC tournament. So, won't have any more basketball scores to report to you guys. All right, and a few last things before we take our last break here. Chinese man was so desperate for an iPhone that he sold his infant daughter for one. Though, to be fair, it was a 6 Plus, and I hear those are very nice. A fight broke out on a Spirit Airlines flight when several women brought a boombox on board, started blasting music, and refused to turn it down. Passengers describe it as the least annoying thing to happen on a Spirit Airlines flight. And finally, the band Garbage is set to release a new album this June. This will be the first Garbage album since Kanye West's Life of Pablo. Those are my thoughts, not yours. You're listening to the 6-8 with DJ Eclectic here on WQBR Eagle Radio. Here is Cheerleader by Pentatonics. There you go. That was Aerials by System of a Down, requested by Ashley, who just wanted some System of a Down played. So there you go. And before that was Ring-a-Linga by Taeyang of K-pop fame, member of the group Big Bang. It's currently 7:35 on this Sunday, the 13th of March. You're listening to the 6-8 with DJ Eclectic here on WQBR Eagle Radio. I'm your host, Chris Haig. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Okay, so we got a bit more news for you, starting with an FCC announcement, oddly enough. They came out on Thursday and said they were clamping down on internet privacy, making it harder for internet service providers to share personal information without your permission. FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler laid out a new proposal to regulate companies such as Comcast, Verizon, and AT&T. The new rules would require ISPs to get customer consent in order to give their data to affiliates and other third-party companies. And I imagine this is probably part of the wake of the Apple versus FBI case that has brought up a lot of questions about, security and privacy online. Quote, consumers must be empowered to protect their own privacy. Consumers should have effective control over how their information is shared because it is your data, end quote. That was from senior FCC officials. They also said that giving customers choice, transparency, and security are the core principles of the proposal. The measures would still allow broadband companies to share information with affiliates and partners to advertise communications-related services, but you can opt out of those if you so wish. This would give you the tools to make informed choices about how your information is used and shared online. The committee will vote to let the public weigh in with their comments at the end of this month. And obviously, as you can imagine, cable companies have already criticized their proposal. An industry group said the FCC is setting the stage for more regulations down the road, which could be overly restrictive. They oppose the fact that the Commission is making sector-specific rules, because the proposal would only apply to residential and mobile broadband providers. Websites that collect data and make money by using it for ads, like Google, Facebook, and Twitter, would not be governed by the terms. That's the job for the Federal Trade Commission, not communications. Sector-specific rulemaking ignores privacy-protecting technologies like encryption and virtual networks, and the fact that all major broadband providers already allow consumers to control how their information is used. That was from the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. That's their official statement. So, I'm going to be honest, I've not seen eye to eye on a lot of FCC issues, mostly because in the past I've found them too passive and too permitting for, too easily swayed to let issues become issues. But I think this is actually fairly beneficial